So again, welcome everyone. We're glad to see you here. Again, I am Michelle Fecto, the director of the Center for Labor and Community Studies at the University of Michigan in Dearborn. And today is our first report on the state of labor in Michigan, and which was led by Roland Zullo, who I'll introduce in a second, and was assisted by Jesse Goujon and Jonah Botkin. And so we're going to get into that. The center, if you don't know about our center, we've been in existence since 1957. Our purpose is to support the labor movement and working people in the state of Michigan, and we take the approach of respecting the knowledge of all working people that people come into the room, even though that we will have some experts speaking about data that they've looked at for the last 20 years, especially the last few years in Michigan. We want to also have opportunity for dialogue with people here and respect the knowledge that you bring. We have some upcoming conferences. We put on 6 conferences a year. We put on short courses like collective bargaining, health and safety classes throughout the year as well, and these symposiums. The next 2 conferences that we have a Latino Workers Leadership Institute coming up on the 18th through the 20th, and then we have the Fall Leadership Training coming up at the end or in the middle of November. And you can go to our website, which is posted in the chat, to see more details. We also have a link to the report that Roland is going to, and with Jesse, is going to go through and give some highlights. There's some pretty astonishing to me data that came from these reports. The next section we're going to have, which was also part of the study, looking at organizing drives. So one of the most remarkable organizing drives over the last year or so was the Corewell nurses. I want to say somewhere for 8,000 to 10,000 nurses were organized in one unit, their own local in the state, in this state of Michigan, and against a huge corporation, and they were successful. So we're going to talk to a couple of the rank and file lead organizers in the second session or the second half hour of this workshop, and then we will open it up for discussions on where you think we should be going from here as a labor movement. So that's sort of the agenda. We're going to open up with the report, go to a discussion on how to organize, or what was a successful organizing drive, how that worked, and then open it up for discussion. I will now would like to introduce the folks that we will be talking to for the first session. Now, did I miss anything?
I think you're good. I think you've hit every point.
Okay, why is this not? I'm trying to share my screen here in this one. Is this coming up? I'm seeing are you seeing the introductions, the slide? No. All
I'm
right.
seeing all black from you.
I'm seeing all black too. I don't know why. I want to give it one more shot, and then I will go here. So stop share, trying again to share, hitting this, hitting share. Oh, yay. Okay, everyone can see this loud and clear? Okay. Let me, so we have the 3 people who worked on this report, and they worked on it for several months, putting this together. It was led, I'm going to start at the bottom. It was led by Roland Zullo, who is an associate research scientist and lecturer at the University of Michigan. He studies how labor unions, the public sector, nonprofit organizations contribute to social equity and the formation of sustainable economies. His findings underscore the value of non-market institutions for creating a just and democratic society. Zullo is a member of the Lecturers Employees Organization, AFT 6244, and former member of the United Steelworkers of America. So thank you, Roland, for all your work and being here. Oh, excuse me. Also here today is Jessie Goujon. She is a graduate student here at the University of Michigan on the School of Social Work. She is also a team member of the Center for Labor and Community Studies. She will be graduating in December with a master's in social work with an emphasis on community change, policy, and political social work. Jessie's work for the Center of the Labor and Community Studies as a graduate assistant who aids in conference coordination and research. She also works at the social work school office for student services. So if you're interested, you can contact her if you're interested in coming to U of M. Jessie began in the labor movement as a field organizer for the Michigan Regional Council of Carpenters Union here in Detroit and has a passion for liberatory education. Thanks, Jessie, for being here. Sorry, the bouncing around. Now, Jonah cannot be here today, but he worked on this as well, a lot of the analytical work. He's a senior at the University of Michigan School of Information, studying information analysis. He is passionate about applying his analytical skills to inform policy and improve community outcomes. Alongside his work at the Center for Labor and Community Studies, Jonah is a research assistant at the Youth Policy Lab, where he collaborates on projects analyzing large database sets related to education data and school attendance. So with that, I would also like to introduce right now Dom Buvovich. Please correct me, Dom, if I said that wrong.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dom Błowicz.
Buvovich, sorry. He's a staff member here, fairly new. He's been here a couple of months, but he's made a huge impact and a great addition to the center here. And he'll be also moderating, and you'll hear from him later as well. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand this over to Roland. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Let's see. Can you all see the slide? We conceptualized putting together a report on a regular basis or annual basis that would talk a little bit about the labor movement from the perspective of working people. And let's see, advance. What we did, this report is two parts. One is more of an analytical, data-driven analysis. The other is more qualitative analysis, talking to the nurses and to another group of workers that formed a union last year. This first part covers the data analysis. We draw from three different data sets. So these are all large federal databases, publicly available. The first is the Current Population Survey, or CPS. And from that, what we drew from were the annual social and economic supplement, and it's otherwise known as the March supplement, which has about 65,000 households nationwide, which gives us a few thousand observations here in Michigan. All of our data is from Michigan. All of our analyses is from Michigan. What's useful about the CPS is it actually has a measure on unions. It asks respondents if they belong to a union and if they're covered by a union contract. So we use that in our graphs. The other large data set, even a much larger data set, is the American Community Survey, the ACS. ACS is run by the census, and it's 1% of U.S. households, so it's huge. It's 3.3 million respondents, and we use that as well. It's a highly regarded survey. And finally, we look at the Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics, the OEWS, which now this is different than the other two insofar that it's surveying work establishments. So they contact businesses and they ask them about the occupations that they're employing and the wages they're paying. So the first two data sets are talking to individuals. The third data set is talking to business owners. So what we have to offer for you today is trend analyses. So it's rather a straightforward trend analyses. Now, what we do, which is different, and I haven't seen this in too many other places, is we try to divide up the people, the respondents, into either working class or what we call above working class. And this division was based upon the occupations that people held. Keep in mind, we're only looking at folks that are in the labor market, right? So we're only looking at people who are either working or looking for work. And again, it's only Michigan residents. So we based upon the primary occupation that people had, we divided people into either working class jobs or above working class jobs. And we tracked those for almost 25 years, from 2000, or in some cases 2002, to around 2024. And usefully, using the CPS data, we're able to break out unionized working class people from non-union working class respondents. Okay, so that's our approach. So let's jump into the graphs. So the first graph here looks at wage income. Now, what we did with income is this is all inflation adjusted figures. So it's based upon 2024 dollars going back, and it shows you just what's happened to wages over time from 2002 to 2024. Now, let me just explain the lines here. We have three lines, and you'll see this in the graphs that follow as well. The orange line is the working class respondents that don't have a union. The blue line at the top are people above the working class, and the green line are people who are working class, but they have a union. Okay, so this is the changes in wages over time, inflation adjusted changes in wages over time over this period. So what you can see here is that we see dips in the periods around the Great Recession for all groups. The Great Recession was from around 2007 to mid 2009. So we see dips there, and there's a bit of an ebb and flow to these trends. But for the most part, the difference stays about the same between the orange line, the non-union working class, and the working classes. Approximately, people who are above working class earn, on average, roughly double the income of working class persons, right? The green line, which is the union working class, they close that gap quite a bit, roughly $20,000 annually. It changes over time somewhat, but you can see there's a union advantage here. Working class folks that have a union are much closer to the earnings of people above working class. Now, you might have questions about some of this. I think we've asked to put questions in the chat, correct? And if you have it, and there'll be a chance later on in the presentation to ask questions as well. So this next graph looks at pension percentage. So one of the questions that the CPS asks people is, do you have a pension plan at work? And if so, do you participate in it? So these are the proportions of people that actually participate in a pension at work. Again, same color code for the lines. The working class non-union, that's the orange line on the bottom. The above working class, that's the blue line. And then the green line is the working class occupations, people in working class occupations that have a union. The first thing to note, I think, from all of these lines is a downward trend. And I think this should be concerning to anybody who is concerned about the labor market here in Michigan, because what it's suggesting is a fairly steady decline in pension participation by working people here in Michigan. I think that something like this has long-term negative implications for retirees. So these workers will someday retire, and many of them won't have a pension. So, for example, the working class non-union group, the orange line, um, in 2002, roughly 40% participated in a pension, and that dropped to around 25% by 2024. Even people above working class, the blue line, right? In 2002, they were roughly at 65% participation in a pension, and that's dropped below 40%. Note again, though, the working class union line, the green line, is above both of those. It's still declining at roughly the same rate as the others, but it is higher, and this, of course, reflects upon the efforts by unions to have pensions and to protect them. So we're seeing that here in this graph. We also ask the CPS also asks the question, do you have employer paid health care at your workplace? And we also further ask, if you do have it, do you pay part of it, or does your employer pay all of it? So here again is another, which should be a concerning trend. These are the respondents who told the survey that their employer fully pays for healthcare, fully pays. And we see a very rapid decline here, especially in the years leading up to 2012. So from 2002 to 2012, that decade, we see a very rapid decline for all groups in terms of the percentage of people who tell us that their employer fully pays for healthcare insurance. Again, in fact, what's sort of interesting here is that the working class non-union group and the above working class group the patterns are very similar. They fall at roughly the same rates, from about 38% in 2002 to less than 20% at the end of the period. Once again, if you look at the green line, that is the working class union group. That's in decline as well, but pretty comfortably above both other groups in terms of fully paid employer health care. So there has been a loss. What this tells us is that there's been an economic shift in for many employees, away from employers towards workers to jointly pay for healthcare insurance. That's what's happened over this period. Now, perhaps as a consequence of that, what we're also seeing is a rise in the application of Medicaid insurance. So Medicaid is the public healthcare insurance available to people who are poor. And we see from 2002 to the end of the period, we see all groups rise in the proportion that are accessing Medicaid. Now, you look at the orange line, which is working class people who don't have a union. In 2002, roughly 5% accessed Medicaid. That goes up to around 16, 17% by the end of the period. Part of the reason this is happening is, of course, it suggests greater levels of hardship by working persons. But Another factor here is in 2014, there was a Healthy Michigan Plan, which was an extension of the Affordable Care Act, which extended and made more people eligible for Medicaid. And that happened in 2014. So you could begin to see sort of an increase around 2014 that goes up pretty sharply. That's that that is in part explained by the increased level of eligibility by Michiganders for this benefit. Once again, if you look at the people above the working class, their rates are going up, but much lower than the rates for people who are working class. And you also see that the green line, which varies quite a bit, but it's more closely resembles the above working class. Now, what this suggests to me is that one of the things unions do is, in addition to protecting healthcare insurance through employers, the other thing that unions do is perhaps reduce the level of dependency that the state has on public health insurance for its working persons. Another factor we looked at was underemployment. So we define underemployment as people who are working part-time, but not by choice. That's how we define it. And the CPS provides those measures. It first asks if people are unemployed, and then if they are unemployed, it asks the reasons why. Some people do choose to be unemployed for perhaps to take care of family members. It's their choice. These are persons that actually want to work full time, but they are part-time employed. Not surprisingly, the orange line, the working class persons that don't have a union, we see their underemployment is much higher over the period than the other two groups. The other thing to note here that again, is the effects of the Great Recession. Again, just to remind you all, the Great Recession began at the very end of 2007, and it ended right midway through 2009. So if you look at this graph, roughly, if you can see the arrow, can you guys see the arrow that you do? Okay, so I have a little marker here. I'm trying to, at the beginning of the Great Recession, the underemployment percentage for people who are working class was less than 10%. Okay. At the end of the recession, the Great Recession, that had risen to about just under 13%, maybe 12%. Okay. What I want you to see here, which I think needs to be talked about, is the recession for people who are working class was, first of all, much deeper. You see that the underemployment levels went up, kept climbing after the Great Recession was officially called off. The organization that determines when a recession begins and ends is NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research. So they called it off in mid 2009, but you can see that the underemployment for people who are working class kept growing after that. In fact, it wasn't until around 2018 where the underemployment rate for people who are working class returned to the levels prior to the recession. What this tells you is that for working class persons in our state, the recession is not only much deeper, but also much longer than it is for others in this state. This was rather surprising to see. Roughly a decade, longer from 2009 to 2018. And again, Looking at the other groups, of course, most people are affected by a recession, a deep recession, but we don't see the same level of effect for people above working class. And once again, if you look at the green line, which is the union group that are working class, they are roughly about at the same rate as people who are above working class. So the folks that were really deeply harmed by that recession in terms of depth and length were people who did not have a union that were working class. This graph comes from the ACS, the American Community Survey, and this reflects again. It sort of reinforces what we talked about in the previous graph, which is that the recession has a much deeper and longer lasting effect for people who are working class. Now, the ACS does not give us a measure for whether or not people belong to a union or not, which is why the green line disappears here. Okay, but we do have the same group. We have above working class and working class, same color codes. The working class is the orange. And these are the percentage of people that receive food stamps. So food stamps can be thought of as an indicator for household stress, right? People need food stamps, access food stamps to help them pay the bills. We see, again, roughly 2007, well, the end of 2007, so roughly maybe 16 or 17% of working class households had food stamps at the beginning of the Great Recession. By the end of the Great Recession, that climbed to almost 20%. But notice how the demand for food stamps by working class households continued to grow after that. Continued to grow. It peaked at 2011. And then it starts to decline thereafter, but it doesn't return to pre-recession levels until around 2019. Again, it took roughly a decade for, at least by these measures, it took roughly a decade for average conditions to return for people who are working class, for households that are working class. Again, this is another indicator that a recession is much deeper and much longer for people who are working class. We see a similar pattern for people who are above working class, but again, it's not nearly as dramatic in terms of the demand for food stamps, and it returns much faster. So I think of this, what this suggests is the importance of having benefits like this in our society and in our economy. We need to have benefits like this to help our working class citizens. The ACS also usefully gives us information about housing costs. What this measure gives you, what this graph tells you, is it's sort of housing costs as a proportion of household income. Now, often you might hear about a rule of thumb that a comfortable ratio of housing costs to income is roughly 30%. So you should be, households spend 30% of their income on housing is comfortable. Anything above that is high, it's stressful. Anything below that it makes other kinds of expenses much more affordable. So here's what we do. We have in this graph, you see we have renters and we have homeowners. And you can see, again, the orange line are for the working class. The blue line is for above working class. The dashed lines are for homeowners. The solid lines are for renters. The only group that is comfortably below the 30% threshold are people who own their home that are above working class. So during the whole period, they fluctuate anywhere from like 25% to around 18% of their household income is going to pay for shelter. Shelter, by the way, includes not just your house, but also utilities as well. The working class homeowners are better still. Owning a home is advantageous. But renters for both groups pay a significantly sort of higher, consistently higher amount of their household income goes to pay for shelter. Um, for people above the working class, it bounces around between 30 and 40% of their household income pays for rent. Um, but what I want you to see here, which is somewhat shocking for us to see, is if you look at working class households that rent. Now, a working class household, how we define that is that everybody in the household has to have a working class occupation. So the working class households, you can see during the Great Recession, because of the loss of income, the graph goes up. So from around 2000, the end of 2007 through 2009, we see it going up here. But look at in recent years. In recent years, we see this climb. This ratio of housing costs to income climbs to over 63%, roughly 63% in the last year that for which data is available, 2023. Meaning that for working class households, for shelter, 63% on average of their income is paying just for housing, which of course must be incredibly stressful because it means you have very little extra for things like transportation, food, leisure activities, education, other important expenses. So we were quite shocked to see that it was so high and it's climbing, which explains why there's so much attention being placed on affordable housing today in our society. So now I'm going to pause, and Jesse, I can scroll this for you as we go along. I'm going to pause. Jesse's going to talk a little bit about the findings we have. This is from the OEWS data. This is from the survey of employers, which asks about how many people you employ across occupations and what you pay.
Yeah, so we're gonna look, we decided to highlight a few key what we call benchmark positions from different sectors of Michigan's economy and labor force. So we're gonna highlight a few for this presentation, but there are more in the report. So you should read the report after the presentation. So our first one we're gonna highlight is manufacturing. As we know, manufacturing is critical to Michigan's economy, especially in automotive industry. I see a few people from UAW here. So for manufacturing, just to give some light, that's a pretty broad field. And so the top five job titles for manufacturing were assemblers and fabricators, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers, first line supervisors, machinists, and cutting, punching, and press machine setters, operators, and tenders. So figure 2.1, which you're seeing here, displays the trend for Michigan production workers' employment and inflation adjusted wages from 2000 to 2024. So the blue line is showing jobs, so the amount of jobs available in this industry, and the orange line is showing inflation adjusted wages. So we can look over time and see how the demand for jobs and availability for jobs compares to the wages earned. In this, we can see that Michigan experienced a sharp drop between 2000 and 2010, So in available jobs, there was estimated 629,000, and then it dropped to 346,000, so almost in half. Um, this is interesting because it occurred in the wake of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, so we can see the direct impacts of policy on our industries. Um, and then we can also note that jobs begin to rise again, and then we can see the impact of the 2019 COVID pandemic, 2020 time. There's like a slight drop around 2020. But it gradually begins to recover again. And when we look at wages, we can see that there's a consistent decline, and it eventually plateaus. So the job rates are changing more rapidly than necessarily the wages. And this is like a threat towards attracting young workers into entering the manufacturing industry. The next benchmark position we chose was teachers, specifically elementary school teachers. I think all of us in this Zoom call have been influenced by a teacher in our life, and it's also such a quintessential occupation of being notoriously underfunded and yet highly needed in the American economy. So we chose to focus on elementary school teachers. In 2000, we see an anomalous year, so we can kind of ignore how low that is in 2000. But when we look at employment trends afterwards for elementary school teachers in Michigan, it's pretty consistently in a decline. When we look at this, though, it's important to consider the decline in student population as well. So it kind of matches the employment decline with the decline in population for students, because roughly it's a 16% decline in teachers. Over the time period, it roughly matches 18% decline in student population. However, what's pretty notable is that the wages have a clear downward trajectory. So average purchasing power of elementary school teachers over this time, with the average inflation adjusted wages for teachers during the first 5 year period from 2000 to 2004 was around $41, whereas the average for the final 5 years, 2020 to 2024, was $35, which is nearly a 15% decrease. So their wages are continually decreasing. I think it's also important to note, and we mentioned in the study, that there has been a decline in Michigan student performance as well. And there is like a quite strong association between the decline in teachers' pay and the decline in student performance, which is something to think about.
Hey, Jesse, I just want to jump in just to make sure as you look at these graphs, note that there are two y-axes. On the left y-axis gives you the jobs, the number of jobs in thousands. Okay. The one on the right, the one on the right axis gives you the inflation adjusted wages. So when you look at these, the um, so they're just for interpretation. Okay.
Thank you. And next, we are going to focus on healthcare support. So, healthcare support includes positions such as nursing assistants, health home or home health aides, and medical assistants. They're critical jobs in patient care, but they don't necessarily require extensive clinical training. Figure 2.4 plots trends in employment and real wages for healthcare support positions from 2000 to 2024. Overall, we can see that employment trends in this sector indicate growth. So there's a rising demand for healthcare in Michigan. Um, we can also see there is a COVID spike. So obviously, there's this really large spike, which comes around 2019, 2020 pandemic. Um, what is interesting though is that the growth continues past the spike of COVID, which indicates that there's a continual need for healthcare professionals. When we look at wages, the average purchasing power of wages paid to medical care support staff has not increased. So along with the growth in demand for these jobs, there is no significant increase in wages. The inflation adjusted wages for workers in these roles declined from 2000 to 2024. It went from roughly $19 to $18 an hour, from $19 to $18 an hour. There's also no evidence that these healthcare heroes in Michigan who helped us through the COVID pandemic received any sort of pay increase from the pandemic. So this is a very interesting and compelling graph to look at because we can see such a strong demand in jobs and need, but then no consistent increase in wages, which kind of leads to an ideal opportunity to unionize, which we'll see more of an example of in registered nurses. So this is particularly interesting to highlight because we have some nurses who we're going to speak with today who participated in our qualitative section of the study. But registered nurses, so this is figure 2.8. Again, nurses are a very well-known and loved profession, and they're very critical in patient care. Most patients interact more with nurses than they do with doctors. This report provides an analysis of an organizing drive that was held by nurses this past year, and we can actually see within this trend, which you can also see in the report. So the employment of registered nurses in 2000 was estimated around 78,000. And then by 2024, the occupation estimates reached 104,000. So it's been a pretty steady increase in employment. However, there has not been an increase in pay. So, compared to others featured in this report, the real wages of registered nurses remained pretty narrow. So, there's not that much difference between the beginning of the study and the end of the study. They started on the low end from $41 an hour and on the high end to $45 an hour. So, in general, the trend of wages is pretty flat. However, we can see that there's a significant increase in the demand of jobs. So again, just like the healthcare professionals, this is kind of an ideal time to unionize because there is an increased demand, but you're not receiving the fair wages that you deserve. Which leads us very seamlessly into our next section, which is the qualitative section of this presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Oh, it has to, if Roland, if you could stop, I think it has to. Thank you. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Not just yet. Now we can. Yep.
Okay. Amazing. Okay, so we had an amazing opportunity to be able to speak with some local nurses who unionized, had a successful unionizing drive within this past year, and that's the Teamsters Local 2024. We have two of the participants from our focus group here who are going to speak with us and share some of their stories. So I'm quickly just going to go through the methods of our focus group and then I'll introduce our speakers and we'll go into our discussion. So this was the qualitative section of our study. And we did this through focus groups. So we used NLRB data to find successful union campaign drives that happened within this past year. And based on the reported successful drives, we chose two to have highlighted case studies. So one of our choices was the UFCW Local 951 C3 Industries High Profile. So this is included in the report, and I would recommend reading it. It's very interesting. They are a cannabis industry who are one of the first within the cannabis industry to unionize. And then our other focus group was IBT Local 2024 with Corewell Health Nurses. They are such a large drive. They had nearly 10,000 nurses who successfully unionized. So we actually held two focus groups with them in order to really hear their full experience. The focus group's questions were focused on motivations to unionize, strategies of unionization, strategies of the employer for union busting, and just better understanding what led to their successful drive. We chose the nurses to highlight because it is just like an unprecedented win and truly made labor history in Michigan. Um, so our intention was to learn and share success of newly certified Michigan unions. Today, we are joined by two of our head organizers and nurses. So we have Sarah Johnson and Michelle Vincent. Sarah Johnson, BSN RN, is a critical care nurse and educator from Michigan who became one of the original organizers at Corewell Health. She helped lead her hospital through the historic campaign that brought nearly 10,000 nurses across 9 campuses into the Teamsters, one of the largest new nurse unions in the country. Today, Sarah serves as a representative with Teamsters Local 2024, where she continues to stand alongside her coworkers at the bargaining table, fighting for safe staffing, fair pay, and a contract that protects both patients and the nursing profession. Michelle Vincent, RN, is a mother, grandmother, and nurse who has spent her entire adult life caring and nurturing others. She graduated nursing school in December 1999. She began her employment with Oakwood in 2002 and has been there through the mergers with Beaumont and Spectrum, which is now Corewell Health. She's a natural leader and loves sharing her knowledge and experience with others, especially new nurses. In October 2023, when she learned Corewell RNs were beginning an organizing campaign with the Teamsters Union, she immediately jumped on board as a leader for her Dearborn campus. Driven by her passion for her profession and nearing retirement, she saw the downward spiraling of healthcare in her hospital. She chose to bravely stand up for all nurses by putting in countless hours talking and educating nurses on the benefits of becoming Teamsters nurses. It was an act of love, knowing her profession is now better off than when she entered it. She's a local 2024 union steward and a member of the bargaining committee. She's truly honored and grateful to be representing all 10,000 Corewell Health RNs. They are currently in negotiations for their first contract. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to just go through some questions, and then we will have a question and answer portion after. So please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. But thank you both for joining us. To begin, you successfully unionized nearly 10,000 nurses across several campuses. What were the working conditions that led you to this action?
Hi, everyone. Sarah Johnson here. So yeah, we started unionizing in 2023. Once we had enough after the merger that happened with Spectrum Hospital and Beaumont Hospital. We had a huge merger in 2022, so we became Corewell, and Corewell is now the largest employer in Michigan. We were told that we were going to take the best situations from the west side of the state, the Spectrum hospitals, and take the best from Beaumont hospitals to make the best healthcare system possible. We were really optimistic, and we were waiting, for these changes to occur. We soon realized the changes that were occurring were budget cuts, restructuring, and to save them, the bottom dollar. So it took a turn for the worst, and nurses were losing their jobs. We were losing our resources. We weren't feeling supported, and we definitely weren't being heard at all. So we had a lot of concerns with patient safety and other things that we had to deal with on the daily, being on the ground, working at the bedside with the nurses, with our patients, but our voices weren't being heard. So there just came a point where we said, we need to do something. And if they're not listening to us, maybe if we have a collective voice, then we can be heard.
Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, just like I said in my bio, nearing the end of retirement and working with Corewell for so long, I just saw the steady decline of my profession. So not only have they taken away nurses, they've taken away our aides, all our support staff, and expect us to do more and more and more with less and less and less, including broken equipment. So all these things just led to enough is enough. And yes, like Sarah mentioned, our voices were not being heard. We tried all the internal ways to have our voices be heard, and they would look at us and say, "We hear you," but nothing was changing. So we decided to change it.
Had there been any attempts to organize previously?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There had been several over the years between the different hospitals, even when we were Oakwood, and then Beaumont, most recently in 2019 and
Yeah.
2018. Beaumont spent over $6 million stopping that campaign.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know you all chose to ultimately unionize with the Teamsters, which is not traditionally a nurses union. Can you speak a little bit about that relationship and the support that the Teamsters lent you?
The Teamsters were huge, and we felt like we needed a corporate, we have this huge Corewell corporation now. We don't even see it as a hospital, like it's a corporation, right? And we needed somebody to be able to match that type of beast of a organization. So like Michelle was saying, we tried unionizing in the past. We tried with MNA, Michigan Nurses Association. There was a few of them that we tried with, but they weren't able to do everything that the Teamsters were able to do. When we chose them, we knew that they were the biggest, strongest union in America, and that they seemed confident that they were up for the challenge. We also thought that it was a great idea to unionize all 9 of the Corewell Health East Hospital campuses, just to have that more of that people power, right? So instead of just doing one hospital at a time, like we tried years in the past, we're going to do it collectively. We're going to bring everyone in, and then we have 10,000 voices, and we're much stronger. So it felt like the right move at the time. And it definitely was, because they were with us every step of the way. They believed in us the whole time. The investment that they put into us to make sure that we would cross the finish line was huge. We just had so much support and resources from them every step of the way. We never felt alone. Even like in the beginning when we started, doing the card signing and stuff, they would be there. We would have somebody right there by our sides until we were more comfortable doing it without them. But they never had us feeling alone in any way. And they gave us the tools, the education that we needed to fight this union busting campaign that Corewell unleashed on us.
Your comment made me think of a story that was shared during our focus groups, which was just that the nurses had faith in people voting, regardless of if they filled out their union card, and that the Teamsters also supported you. Would you be able to share a little bit about that?
So because of the prior campaign attempts, during those attempts, nurses were let go. They were targeted by administration and their managers. So this time around, we had so many people who were afraid of those actions, but they would come up to us privately and say like, "Hey, I'm not filling out a card, but I'm going to vote yes. Like, I support the union, but I can't put my face out there. I don't want anybody knowing." So that was huge for us, knowing that we had an underground network of supporters, but just based on fear because of their past experiences and how, Corewell really pulled out all the stops with the union busting. And Dearborn was the first campus that they focused on. And we had one specific gentleman from one of the largest union busting firms that specifically came into Dearborn, and he was there all the time. So, and people would report back to us like, "Hey, Scabby Sean was on my unit." Nobody would talk to him. So, we just had this huge underground network. So we knew we had the votes.
Right.
We just needed the Teamsters to believe in us that we had it.
So yeah, like the union busting was so disgusting, so much fear mongering that they would tell nurses that if you sign this union card, this union authorization card, and you don't win the union, we're going to find the list of everyone that signed these cards and there's going to be consequences to pay. They weren't putting this in writing, but there were rumors circulating, and you know where the rumors were stemming from. They were coming from the management. So we would have people terrified of that union card. And like Michelle was saying, they'd say, I will vote yes. You tell me when and where, and I will be there. But there is no way I am touching that union card. They were petrified of this thing. And we told the Teamsters, because they have their certain protocols too. When they're organizing and filing for a petition, they need to hit certain markers. And that's why they're so successful. Like they have these certain ways that they do things, you know, and they're very good at it. But we were just under what we should have been when we filed, according to their, you know, IBT protocols. We had a very good rapport with them, a good relationship with the Teamsters. And like I said, a lot of times they were on the ground with us on campus, getting the pulse of the, you know, the nurses too. And they had a lot of faith in us when we said, nurses are different than your other, you know, workers organizing. There's a lot on the line for us. And we fully believe that they will vote yes, but they are too scared to sign this card. It was just a too scary thing. So when they actually filed, it was just a huge show of faith for us that, you know, they believed in us. And those silent yes votes is what we call them. They came through. They really did. We won by a landslide. So we showed them.
Yes, we did.
You had faith in your solidarity, which is awesome. I heard both of you mention fear, and that was a constant present throughout this campaign. Would you be able to speak a little specifically on some of the tactics Corewell Health used, and then also how you all countered that? Like I'm thinking about some of the funny things you did as well.
So they did all kinds of things for their union busting moves. You know, they had management doing their dirty work, but they also had these union busting consultants come in, and they would meet with nurses for their morning shift huddle. So it's a mandatory meeting you get paged for. You have to step away and go to the nursing desk. And that's where we usually would get our daily information about like admissions coming in or any discharges, staffing, all the important things that you need to know for the day. So we would go, and you would get in trouble if you don't go. So once the union busters were on the scene, you would be going to a union busting meeting instead of your daily huddle meeting. Some of them even brought laptops and shared these sick, union busting videos about why unions are bad. And they were just subjecting people that wanted nothing to do with all this. They just wanted to be there and do their job. And they were making them listen to union busting crap at the nursing station. They would have captive audience meetings and orientation. So, it's gotten so bad in the healthcare world, a lot of it is a revolving door. So they were, I feel like their strategy was to get the new hires in, and then that would oversaturate things. And if they could poison them with all their union busting stuff, then they would throw us. So they would have PowerPoints in their orientation, and, they would go through all about why unions are scary and why the Teamsters shouldn't be here, that Teamsters are just for warehousers and truck drivers, and they don't know anything about nurses. Why would you want the Teamsters? Michelle can chime in. There were so many lines that they had. We're a family. Why would you want a third party here? Your flexibility is going to change if you're a union. I can't really, do you a solid anymore as your manager. I have to follow the union contract. Just making it so it was just a lot of unknowns. They were very good at planting seeds of doubts in people's heads. So as the nurse organizers and the Teamsters, instead of chasing these union busting fires and putting them out, we got ahead of it. And it wasn't that hard, because what the Teamsters taught us is the union busting playbook. And it's very predictable. There's nothing special about it. And you can tell what's going to happen just based on, their playbook that they have. So we were able to tell people, they're going to start bringing union busters in. And if you hear somebody say they're a labor consultant or from HR and you don't see a Corewell badge, you know, they're a union buster. So like ask them for a business card because we know they're not going to be able to produce one, you know. So we were empowering nurses with the education beforehand. So they were able to identify it on the spot and say, wait a minute, how did these nurses know this? How did the Teamsters know this was about to happen? How did they know they were going to, you know, say that the Teamsters were only meant for truck drivers and warehouse workers? Like we were saying it before they said it. So it didn't have the same effect on our nurses. When they heard it, they were like, oh my God, they're telling the truth. You guys aren't. Like these are lines. So we got even more creative with the hired union busting consultants, right, Michelle?
Absolutely. And what Corewell and the Union Busters they didn't know their audience. So they forgot that nurses are college educated. We love education. We love research. We want to see why things are the way they are. So they just, you know, went with their stereotypical union busting tactics. And I don't want to say we were too smart for it, but we didn't fall for it because it was like, wait a minute, that doesn't even make sense. Why are you saying like, if the union comes in, I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, or Z. I won't be able to give you a day off. I won't be able to do this. And it's like, how is that even possible? Like, you know, where other people who may be afraid, you know, to even or just believe those things blindly. It's like nurses are educators, we're researchers. So, you know, all you had to do was do a little bit of research and you just knew that those were lies. But the funny thing about the busters being on the floors where there was so many units where as soon as they stepped on, we had warned them that they were coming. So the nurses just shut them down. So it would be like, well, who are you? Because management was saying, oh, this is my friend. This is my friend, Sean. And it was like, oh, okay. He's an expert. And he's an expert at what? Oh, I'm an expert at many things. You know, and they wouldn't really say specifically they were busters, but the nurses would literally turn their backs and walk away and nobody would speak to them. So that just shut them down.
A lot of them were actually excited. They're like, I can't wait till Union Buster comes to my unit because they felt prepared and they were ready to, like, you know, call them out on it. We did an extra step where we, you know, Michelle was saying we're big researchers, right? We found out the first Union Buster's name was Sean Lyles, and we went down a rabbit hole online and we found out that he had a very nice contract laid out to come into Corewell hospitals and break up our union. And we made a big to-do out of it to make everyone know, because it really makes you wonder why Corewell is paying these union busters $425 an hour to come break up the union. Is it because they're really scared that my hard-earned money is going to go to union dues? Like, probably not, when they're paying multiple people this amount of money to go hospital to hospital to break this up. It was just very eye-opening. So we made little baseball cards with Sean's face and called them Scabby Sean. And, you know, we
made our wanted poster. It was an old-fashioned wanted poster with his face that said, you know, he makes $425 an hour to bust our union.
Wait, guys, I got it.
Okay. That's it.
So yeah, we would hang that while we were tabling. So it would be a conversation starter. Obviously, that thing is very strange looking. So people are like, what is that? And then we'll be like, know that face. And this is how much he's getting paid. And this is what he's getting paid to do. And it would really just, you know, disgust people. And even people that weren't pro-union turned pro-union. They came to our side once they started seeing all these union busters riddling the hospital and knowing now what they're getting paid to do. It was like they were running to the union at that point. We were giving them the confidence, the faith, the education, while they could clearly see they're being lied to by the hospital admins, by these union busters coming in. So all of their hard work to union bust us really failed them in the biggest kind of way. I feel like Michelle would agree that anytime they pushed back, it just fueled our fire more. It just fired us up and it made us push even harder. So whatever they tried just didn't seem to work.
And my campus at Dearborn is right in the thick of the automotive. Ford headquarters is there. So a lot of our visitors and community, as they would come in and we were tabling and they would see the Scabby Sean poster, and we would tell them like, hey, who are you visiting today? And they were like, oh, my sister's up on this floor. And we would say, hey, talk to your nurses up there because you're a UAW member or you're a Teamster. Talk to your nurses and tell them, what you find advantageous about being in a union. So we just used it all. We used the community, we used our education, we used the Teamsters knowledge. So thankful for JC 43, that they supported us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we also use social media like
Oh,
crazy.
that was huge.
10,000 nurses, 9 campuses. We also had all the outpatient facilities too. So all the original nurse organizers were very good about getting out on campus, tabling to get the cards signed and, to educate, but you can only get so much by doing that. And Lord knows they weren't letting us post flyers around the hospital campuses or anything like that. Those were thrown away immediately. So we had to really get creative to make sure that everybody knew what was going on. And so we would use TikTok, we would use Instagram. We had a Reddit. We still have a Reddit community. We still have this big Facebook group that's a private group to keep the management moles out. And it really built a sense of community for us. And it was a great way to educate them about the union busting that was going to happen. And it was fun to have everyone come back and tell us, like, today I met this union buster and I was able to say this in front of all these people. And it was very, it had like a family vibe to it in there. And it was a learning experience for everybody to really have this big Facebook platform that's, where we felt safe in. It was a private group. But we did everything we could to reach our members.
It's so impressive how you were able to organize across so many campuses and so many nurses and to use humor and care as a way to do it. Thank you so much for sharing with us all. I know you are both in the midst of contract negotiations. Would you be willing to share a little bit about that experience? And then I'd love to open it to questions for everybody.
Yeah, so we are in the middle of contract negotiations right now, fighting for our first contract. And we have some big goals, some big accomplishments that we want to have for our first contract. And management's continuing to push back on everything and delay things. So we are doing our best to keep everybody united and strong through all those different paths that I was just mentioning. And we have a lot of different committees that we're able to make sure that all voices are heard when we're at the bargaining table. So when the bargaining team is walking in to sit at the table, it's not just a small bargaining table, team going in there. It's 10,000 nurses going in there because we have everyone's backs and they have ours. And we have so many different lines of communication that we're making sure we are able to elevate everyone's voices. So when the time comes to vote for this contract, we all feel like, our voices were heard and we feel good about it. It's going to be a fight though, and we know that. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to shout it out and ask for everyone's support in our communities while we continue to fight for, better working conditions, not only for the nurses, but our patients and our communities that come in there. This isn't just about, compensation. This isn't just about, better pay or anything like that. It's about patients' lives. It's about the nursing profession. It's about raising the bar for all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think now we'd like to open it up to a Q&A for anyone to participate if you have any questions for the nurses and also anyone on the research team.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse, Michelle, and Sarah. I am going to remove spotlights and put us all on gallery view because I know that there are a lot of IBT 2024 nurses in the room. So I think it would just be wonderful if you all could raise your virtual hand or put up a reaction so we can all recognize the really amazing work that you all have done and share our solidarity and our congratulations with you. Because it's really, I mean, what a rich discussion about like the beauty of solidarity and like really the power of busting down fear. I'm now going. Hi, everyone. My name is Dom Wovicich. Michelle introduced me at the beginning. I'm CLCS staff. I'm just going to guide us through some Q&A and hopefully sort of a generative discussion among the participants here in the room. I first want to ask, what questions do folks have? And we can refer back to the quantitative report and sort of the trend lines that Roland and Jesse walked us through. If you have questions for either of our nurses who are speaking with us today, or really anything else. And then after that, I want to talk a little bit about what this means for our next steps as a labor movement together. So I'll open it up. And if you'd like to raise your hand, I'll spotlight you, or if you want to put a question in the chat. But yeah, I will stop talking for just a couple of minutes.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, it's for everyone. Given the data that we were presented with, which clearly shows the advantages of being union, but then also hearing from Sarah and Michelle and Jesse about the drive. And this goes to anybody in the room, what would you recommend our next steps for labor in Michigan, for working people in Michigan? What are your thoughts about where we need to go from here, especially given the current circumstances at the federal level?
I would like to say that we have so many hospitals and other nurses that watched our campaign, and just throughout nursing that unionizing is kind of taken off. So I think that in the nursing profession specifically, that it is just going to take off and go like spread like wildfire with so I know some of the other like SEIU, the Teamsters, AFSCME, everybody is kind of like reaching out to those nurses, just because the hospitals are becoming like the small community hospitals are gone. And those have been bought out by medium-sized hospitals, and those have been bought out by bigger-sized hospitals. And now you're looking at interstate huge commodities that are supposed to be healthcare, but really they're just big corporate greed machines that's going to continue to affect healthcare. So it's almost healthcare specifically needs to unionize, from the nurses' aides to the kitchen workers to the housekeepers to the nurses, everybody. So it's going to spread.
Good.
Amazing, amazing. I believe Lois has a question. If you want to unmute Lois.
Yes, I'm using two devices. I'm on my phone. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay. My question is, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you for a battle, and you're still battling. Aren't any of your nurses losing their jobs during this campaign right now as you go to the table? Are you seeing layoffs or what's going on? Nothing?
Not currently. They actually, during our unionizing campaign, they got rid of that middle management because they decided to centralize all those positions. So it was more management positions that were losing their jobs. So like the mid-level directors, they decided not to have directors at every hospital, but let's have one director for 5 different hospitals. So those were the people who were losing their jobs mostly. And right now, since we won, they kind of know that they've got to maintain status quo. So as Corewell continues um, to like centralize all their positions, hopefully that doesn't happen. But right now, nurses are not the bedside nurses, anyways. I should clarify that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe Roland had a question or comment. Can the nurses mention the podcast support they received?
Yeah, absolutely. So I felt like that was huge. This was right before the vote, few months before the vote. We really started to get support from one of our nurse celebrities, a huge union advocate. Her name is Nurse Erica. She has a podcast called Nurses Uncorked. And I had the honor to go on episode 53. It was called Union Busting Exposed, and had this great opportunity to sit there and just do a deep dive with, somebody that I admire, like talking about what the union busting strategies that have been happening with us. And she was able to just mirror back that this happens at every hospital that's tried to unionize. And that's why so many have failed, because the union busting tactics they use are very effective if you don't know what's happening, if you're not educated about it. So we wanted to go on this podcast because we knew a lot of our younger nurses really looked up to Nurse Erica as well. So I went on her show and we just really talked about all the things. It's a really good episode about union busting. And we came up with a motto during this podcast. So what we were saying with union busting is you expect it, you recognize it, you don't fall for it. So just getting ahead of the game, like we were saying before. And not only was she amazing to get us on the podcast to, have our story shared and to get the union busting education out, but she continued to rally for us on social media too. Social media helped us in so many ways, and she was able to just do video after video on TikTok and Facebook, these little reels, these clips about what Corewell's up to now and why it's union busting and why we can't give up this fight. And, we're so close, you got to just keep pushing a little further, because it wasn't all, it wasn't like a steady incline throughout the whole organization campaign. There were some lulls, there were some dark times. There were some times where people just wanted to give up. So having the community and people like Nurse Erica step up and say, no, you guys, you got to keep going. You're on the right track. It was huge for our morale, and it just kept us moving and kept us going. And that podcast was also a really amazing thing for us.
That's amazing. And I'm so struck by y'all's ability to like inoculate and sort of communicate with one another to build this, this shield, right? This shield against all of the misinformation, against all of the attempts to break your power. Did you want to add anything, Michelle?
I just think that so there was leaders at every campus, and we networked with each other. So, and we would also help each other. So if one of the other hospitals was like, hey, I can't find anybody to table or then myself or one of the other campuses, we would go and help our brothers and sisters out. And that's how we really were able to just defeat Corewell, is because we had a huge network. We had a network of people who were willing to put their faces out there, but we also had that network of people who were, nurses very rarely start at one job and stay there. So like, hey, I transferred from Trenton. Let me go and talk to my old unit nurses that still work there and get them on board. So it was huge. So that's how we did it. There was nothing textbook about our campaign.
Mhm.
That's true.
Yep.
That's incredible. Wonderful. Are there any other questions out in the audience? Feel free to raise your hand, or if you'd like to unmute. We'll give it a couple beats. Otherwise, I might wrap us up and have us sort of just do a little bit of reflection as a set of members of the labor movement. I saw you unmute, Michelle. Is there anything you want to add?
I wanted to just touch on some of the data that Roland and Jesse and Jonah put together. You know, there's all these cuts that are going to be coming to Medicaid, and more people in the workplace are depending on it. So I just wanted to see if there was any thoughts, speculations about, is there anything that the labor movement can do to raise that up, or what can be done to address, because it's going to be a huge hit when the cuts come after the 26 elections. That's how it was timed. But I didn't know if Roland, you wanted to speak on that.
Yeah, I did also want to add, Michelle, is that the most recent jobs numbers do not look very strong or promising.
Right.
So we could very well be entering into another very difficult economic period. So it's not the time to have benefits like this cut. We've seen what the data make very clear is the importance of these benefits on Michiganders, especially working class Michiganders. So I think the labor movement has to fight doubly hard to make sure we protect these.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I'll do a little last call. Here from Beth Goujon. I appreciate your use of qualitative and quantitative data. How did you come to this decision, and what is the value of it, the value of using mixed methods? So maybe Roland or Jesse could respond to this.
I guess I'll go. Well, what the advantage of a mixed method approach does is it gives you both the broad data perspective, but then it allows you to take a more intensive look at what's going on using, in our case, the focus group method, talking to the nurses. And we also talked with some bud tenders that organize as well. So we had two discussions of workers that formed a union in the last year, and the combination of doing a in-depth look with people who had experience in organizing drive, combined with the data showing the kinds of stressors that have been building in the Michigan economy, we thought would be a compelling approach.
Yeah, I would just like to add that just like we saw from our nurses today, like it just added such a warmth and human perspective to the work that we've been looking at for months. Because we started collecting data in like January. We've been working on this for a long time. And so then to have all these numbers and graphs be brought to life by real world experiences and examples, and especially like such a historic victory, it was honestly just so rewarding as like the research team to be able to hear their story.
Yeah, I feel like having people you can turn to really grounds the research in, the lived experience of being part of a union. So thank you everybody for everything you've shared. I just want to close us out with some reflection questions. As I know there are a lot of unions represented here, a lot of different industries, teachers, academic staff, UAW, SEIU, Teamsters, of course. And so with all this information, both the graphs that we saw, as well as sort of the experiences of our nurses here, what are our next steps as a labor movement? What lessons can we learn from Local 2024 about rank and file organizing, about worker to worker power, and how can we bring that to our union leaders, our elected officials, other power brokers within spheres of influence, and just your regular old Joes who are allies of labor. So I think that's something for us to think about as we sort of take the lessons from this symposium today. The last thing that I'll share I am really geeked about this new book that has come out called We Are the Union by Eric Blank. And I just pulled a couple of quotes that I think really speak to the worker to worker power that we've seen here with our nurses, especially by more fully baking in a rank and file ownership of the organizing process. A worker to worker model can help workers consistently relate to staffers, like Teamster staffers, as partners in struggle rather than as experts to be deferred to. We really see how the nurses they knew their turf a lot better than the Teamsters did, and so they let the Teamsters help, but it was their campaign as workers. The last quote I have here is increased bottom-up ownership over union strategy serves as a crucial pedagogical function. Workers learn more and can therefore teach more to others and really have this expansive effect when they're fully included in all key decisions of a drive. And I think that ties a lot back to how we try to run things over at the Center for Labor and Community Studies, where our workshops are taught by fellow workers. We try to engage in a model where people are teaching their peers and their comrades in struggle. So I think that is something that maybe we can end on. I want to thank everybody for being here, all of our speakers, especially the people who compiled the report. And have a wonderful day, everyone.
Yes.